were the rage. Okay. Just also saying, sorry, I forgot to say this. I hope this is okay. We've just started recording as well as part of the Agile 2020 sort of approach. Cool. So they're the mobile phones that existed at the time of the Agile Manifesto. Okay. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I've got a couple of questions I want to fire off to Ari to talk about that time frame. And feel free to jump in on the chat. Feel free to share some thoughts and bounce some ideas off as we start to sort of dig into this a bit more. All right. So Ari, year 2000. Tell me more about what was happening in the year 2000. So it's the year leading into Snowbird. So what had happened in the year 2000, right? You've had no prep, so let's see how well you remember this.
I have to take you a little bit back to 1994. When I started, I made a choice in 1994. I was coming out of a large waterfall project at the Dutch IRS. And it was, as a lot of waterfall, just even if you do it in a proper way, you're late, there's so much redundant work in there and not focusing on the value and blah, 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 blah. And I just made a point. I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I remember going to the office and I said, okay, whatever you guys have for me, because I was working for the consultancy firm, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I thought, you know, if I get fired, then I'll get fired. Let's just see. But I don't want to have the responsibility of wasting public money, right? If you spend public money, you need to do it in a proper way. That was my motivation. From that moment on, you start experimenting. I never had so many pizzas in my life, because after work, you would go to an office, you would order some pizzas with people, sit down, have a chat, right? And trying to improve on lessons learned. In 1997, I got connected to the Dsdm community in the UK. And I was working based on the concept of rapid application development. The Dsdm community used that as a fundament. This was the RAP user groups, rapid application development user groups, that brought the intellectual property of the Dsdm community together. And in 2000, that's what I did. I was doing commercial project doing Dsdm. I was working, and that's very interesting, I think, at least always from my perspective. I was working in a company that was most likely one of the earliest, first, really on the inside agile companies with self-organizing teams, defining your own products and services, hiring and firing, and do all the things in between. And that was the cool part. So, and then it's early 2001. It was on a Thursday evening, and the question was, can you fly to us for the United States to speak on a conference? That was the original message that I got from headquarters from Dsdm, and I flew in. So the time was different work for 7 years, very active in the community, first generic community, then the Dsdm community. And that's what brought me to Salt Lake.
Okay, so who invited you, if you don't mind me asking, and why did they invite you?
Well, I think my dear friend Alistair Cockburn is somehow connected to this, because what happened is that Alistair has a friend, I think he still has, is Dane Faulkner. And the Dsdm consortium was expanding. So there were chapters of it's sort of organized like the Hells Angels, right? So there were chapters, the UK, the Netherlands, Benelux, Denmark, Sweden, etc. And from the consortium, we were setting up a North American chapter, and Dane and Jean Baker, who passed away sadly a couple of years ago, were supposed to lead this chapter together. And because Dane and Alistair are connected, Dane said to Alistair, if you're organizing some sort of event like this, the Dsdm consortium should be represented. So Dane connected to Mary Hansen, who was running the Dsdm back office at the time, and she gave me a call. She said, "Hi, Ari, can you make it?" And that was on a Thursday evening. On a Friday, I had to go to the UK anyway to work with her. Got back home in the evening, and the next morning I was at the airport again to fly to Salt Lake. So it was from Alistair to, I think, from Alistair to Dane, from Dane to Mary to me.
So what you said is that the DSD community is quite strong, obviously in Europe, and remains relatively strong, relatively speaking, in Europe, right? The DSDM, how did that come about? Like, has that been around for can you tell us a bit more about DSDM? Because I don't think we really hear much about it in Australia.
Everybody has his own background. I have to say, I have always been an agnostic. For me, working agile is like Like, I like to be in my kitchen. I am in my kitchen at the moment. And when I have a new recipe, the first time I make it according to the book. And I make it the second time according to the book, and the third time according to the book. And then I start bringing in my lessons learned and my ideas. And I was doing rapid application development from 1994 to 1997 with success. And when I met the Dsdm consortium, the first thing that I saw was a big poster with the 9 principles of Dsdm. And Alistair Cockburn said, like 2 months ago, he said to me, Ari, a couple of weeks after writing the manifesto, I got hold of the 9 principles of the Dsdm approach. And he said, that just covered all. We should have put that on the internet instead of the manifesto itself. And I think for me, it's a full delivery framework. When people ask me about Agile outside the world of IT, you know, it makes me drop my pants, because Agile inside the world of IT only doesn't bring anything. You know, you can only bring the value if you do it all together. So this is why I use the word full delivery, right? You want to bring value, you have to do that together. So the marketing and education and training and the audit trail and the software solution in there and all those other data provision, it all has to be connected. And you have to take that into one approach. So multi-team delivery was on my radar all the time. And this is where Dsdm helped me a lot. But I do have to say, I didn't do that exclusively all the time. You know, it starts, there's a green field, there's absolutely nothing. So even from defining the backlog, you start working in an agile way with all those people involved. And I was able to do that in a very successful way in the second half of the 90s, very happy clients. And I think that the real thing is about, I always say Agile is an interaction concept. It focuses on having the right rituals, like you have the daily and the retro and the heartbeats, where you have all the stakeholders together to avoid delay, because for me, that's what Agile is all about. And Dsdm itself has a 2-step approach, defining the backlog with whom and how. And then once you have the backlog, the delivery of it with the same team. Don't change people, you know, keep the team together. Don't hand over information because you get into trouble. And that's what I still try to do when I go into companies to do it. These days, I do agile transformations. I help people to become agile and organizations. But I think that's the big value. It's full delivery, not focusing on IT only. Absolutely not. Because you leave too many people out that have also a role in bringing things into production.
Mm-hmm.
It focuses on the interaction and visual management. You know, I cannot do a Dsdm training here, but that's for me for example, visual management. The flip charts on the wall, daily updated, that represent the info, that save you so much time and so many misunderstandings. So for me, that's the fundament of Dsdm. But as I said, for example, pairing, I didn't even know it was called pairing, but I started pairing in the late 80s, to give you an idea. And I do that ever since. But I used a lot of Dsdm, and I still do. Yeah.
Okay. So if we take a slight step back from the DSM and the methods, what sort of big things were happening in your world? So you've mentioned that there's lots of high project failures and the waterfall. We had the Y2K, so lots of big, slow ERP implementations going on. You've got a different way of delivering, which seems to be more successful. What else is happening? What were the trends at the time? Like, what was the noise from the community at the time?
Yeah, I already mentioned that I was working in this company that was most likely the first agile company, at least in the Netherlands, or I don't know, across the globe. That company was started in 1996, and it started sort of a movement, at least in the Netherlands, of having a lot of empowerment into the teams, and I think also it was just the time for it. That people start becoming from being a payroll slave into, hey, hold on, I've got something to say. And I got my education, I got my degrees. You don't have to tell me all the time what to do. And by the way, I have my own ambition. I don't want to be forced into standard, you know, promotion paths and development paths of my career. So you saw a couple of things happening at the same time. And of course, Peter, when you just showed us those slides, very nice to see those phones. But remember, when I started working differently in 1994, there was hardly any internet, at least not for the public. And that became increasingly more important. Technology became increasingly more important. And where my initial change was in 1994. Okay, guys, we have to be able to respond to change because, you know, technology and innovation goes faster and faster. By the time we were around, let's say, writing the manifesto, technology started developing at such a pace that it not only facilitated us in what we did at the time, but it started disrupting complete business models, making whole businesses, the way they run their businesses, obsolete. And that was coming. So you had on one side, we call it the millennials these days. I don't know why. There's again an etiquette that you put on people, a label that you put on people. But that stream of people where you said, okay, you know, I perceive my career, I perceive how I want to work in a different way. The technology platform that is changing faster than ever and becomes more complex. And at the same time, this all creating a world where speed is becoming more and more important. You cannot just wait, because I always say, when you're late, don't worry, competition will be on time. And that's where we are more or less going already 20 years ago. We just didn't know that it would become like it is at the moment, right? The speed is insane, technology is insane. But at the same time, it was already kickstarted then. So I think the big trend was on the human side. How do I perceive my career? What do I want to get out of it? How do I spend my working life? And the other side, technology. And you have to bring those together. They'll facilitate that, by the way, bringing that together. So.
Okay, so I'm sort of just listening and taking notes in the background, and the sort of key trends that I'm sort of hearing is that there's a shift in management thinking in people. So, you know, empowerment, individualism. Presumably, there's I think in Australia there's a trend in the contractor market starts to pick up rather than permanent employees. So rather than payroll to consultant or self-employed, there's a shift. There's a shift around the internet and how that starts to become far more prevalent, and that sort of coupled onto the speed of technology changing, disrupting business models, right? And I guess the other part then the response is, how do you respond to change, and your ability to respond to change on aggressively as things moved around you despite the speed of change that occurred. So they're sort of the key things I'm sort of picking up. Has anyone else picked up anything else I want to share? Someone has mentioned Osmal and internet in 1994 with dial-up and a free node service in Ottawa. Very good. Any other comments or thoughts and trends that anyone else has picked up through that? Cool. Yeah.
Anyone
cool.
jumping in or?
Thanks, Ignacio. So do you want to read out your comment, Ignacio?
Yeah, look, thanks, Pete. Look, I was just reflecting on what you were saying, Ari, and at that point in time, it was evident, as you say, that the acceleration of technological change was really forcing and promoting a shift to, as we say, the agile software development and the manifesto as a reaction, I guess, to the constraints of the predictive and traditional development approach. So I think it was just a real catalyst and, you know, at an inflection point. And that's, I can see now that applies not only to, we live in an increasingly VUCA world. So change is not just in software development, but in process, in business design, in business traditional, you know, business model development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, government, manufacturing, health. We cannot stand still, otherwise we'll be overwhelmed.
Ignacio, can I add to this? Because before we start pointing at, you know, okay, people want different things in those types, because Michael is asking, you know, was that a driver, you know, that perceiving your career in a different way? From my side, when you look at the manifesto, a couple of things like trusting people to get the job done, that kind of thing, and given the environment, you know, that they need. So yeah, that was in there. But at the same time, you know, the first 15 years of my Agile career, I tried to be nice to people who work waterfall, but waterfall sucks. And it embeds problems, the handover of information from one group to another, the remote and written communication, all the overhead spend, not focusing on the delivery. And of course, if you do big stuff, and I mean, you know, billions projects, okay, I can understand those, right? That you have to do some of those things to formalize. But waterfall is embedding a lot of problems, even if you do it properly. And I think that came to the surface. And that was pushed by the need for faster delivery and more valuable delivery. I don't know about where you guys are, but there was I'm now quickly going back in my brain. In 2014, there was sort of a statistic in the Netherlands that said most IT projects, and remember that most of the people were doing still waterfall and still are doing waterfall, right? Where they have sequential processes with different groups of people. But they said that at that moment in time, that 77% of the IT projects, only IT projects, was over budget and over time. And the budget that they, let's say when they close the project, they would be 96% over budget, which basically means double. Right, and this is the thing, because you said about the Ignacio, you use the word predictable, and that's the funny thing with waterfall. It just gives you the idea it's predictable, and it's fucking not. It's a mess. Period. That's what it is, and that's what we have to understand. And the point is, can you accept things are not predictable? And this technology vibe that we have the last 15 years makes it more and more clear it's unpredictable. So you have to manage the unpredictable instead of pretending it is, right? That's where we need to go. And that's a big fight because it's a paradigm shift and that's very difficult.
I think Terry's Killen's put in an interesting comment there. Terry, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, the funding dilemma, big design up front and the business case, an issue of that. Still it is, I think. And don't get me wrong. I understand if you are a organization, company for profit or not, if you start something, you would like to have an indication how much I'm going to spend on it and what do I get out of it, right? So you need to have that clear thinking. So this is one of the things that I love in Dsdm, where you have just a couple of weeks, whether you call it sprint zero, I call it the foundations, where you set, okay, what is the value that we are looking for and what more or less do we think that it will take to get there. I think that's okay. As long as you understand these are estimates and guesses. They are not written in stone or in concrete. How do you say this? And the big problem is, especially with old school managers, and note that most managers are old school. The moment that you give a number, man, you're held hostage. All of a sudden, bang, there you are. Because you said it was this. I said, no, an estimate. Yeah, but you said, those kind of debates, I had them so many times. You don't want to go over budget over and over again if the word budget is a word you want to use, because then you are bringing an old problem back, and we have to fix that problem. And I think you can only fix, I know you can only fix that problem by bringing in the right people and empowering where they should be empowered. Managers that have a role in a change advisory board are a fucking laugh, because managers don't even know, all the details on your fingertips, what you need. So get out and let the people who know decide, and be flexible. And this is where, for me, the word agility stands for. Be flexible on what you deliver, but be fixed on the value that you're looking for. And that's, I think, for a lot of people, very difficult. And the push from shareholders even is empowering this. The education systems that we have across the globe are based on this, pretending to be predictable when you make an Excel. I mean, that's where we are. And that Excel becomes the truth, and it never is. It's not even representing the truth. It's representing at best, either a lie or the best possible version of the truth that we think it will be. And that's the kind of thinking that we need to have together. Sorry, I'm getting into my passion and I'm blocking airtime. So I want to open up for people, right?
I think Martin Foster asked a question around whether the stats have changed since then. And I think Craig Smith sort of suggested the Chaos report suggests roughly 2/3 of IT projects fail. I know once I had a bottle of wine and had lots of time and Googled the early survey on project success rates. Does anyone want to take a guess as to what year I found them for? Okay, maybe I'm just a geek. 1981.
Can I jump in, because I'm trying to read in the chat box questions coming in, and I saw one from Nikki P. He said, lots of agile people say they are agile, but they're more Agile. I don't know what the Agile means. Maybe they need to eat more pizza, eat more pizza. I think we have to go to the psychology of people. And the psychology of people is, whether you're religious or not, in my opinion, in here, we all have this little reptile brain, that crocodile brain that has survived for the last 650 million years. And if you wonder why crocodiles are lying still in the water, they know if I don't move, unless I have to, I will survive. Moving means changing, change means danger, right? And we didn't overcome that paradigm. And people claim they like Agile, and people claim that they are making change, but most people are caught in that paradigm of not changing. So they just project a little bit of Agile stuff, the mechanical part maybe. And then you see an Agile process that is, in defining a backlog and then delivering, and then we have test and user acceptance, and we have still 6 steps to go to production. When I go into transformation, I don't want to insult anyone, but the most difficult ones in a company, when you go do a corporate transformation, the most difficult ones are the people that think they are Agile because they're not open to change. They said, okay, I learned a little book and that's what I do. And I see Neil in my screen. Niall, sorry, Niall, for a mispronunciation. Hey, man. He wrote a book on this, and we underestimate in Agile working the need for changing paradigms. The paradigm change is so difficult to make, and it requires an open mind, and most people don't have it. So, Nikki, sorry to say, but you're spot on, right? People say they are Agile. I don't know what you mean with the Agile. I say I know Agile in name only.
So, Ari, it's a combination of waterfall and Agile, and I just think pizza makes everyone feel a lot better.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Cool. So talking, and there's been quite a few comments that is going through. So thanks a lot for your questions, right? But to close out the question that was around the project success rates, a company called Arthur D. Little used to be a strategy firm which was competitor to McKinsey's, Booz-Allen and others. In 1981 or 2-ish, they had a report that said roughly 2/3 of IT projects fail, right? What I find remarkable is that in 2020, the stats haven't materially shifted, right? Which absolutely blows me away, right? And I think if you quote the Chaos report, and I'll let on Craig to jump in here because he probably knows it better than I do, or certainly knows it better than I do. My understanding is that if you're using Agile, and I put in inverted commas, whatever Chaos defines as Agile approaches on projects and programs, you're more likely to be successful in your other 10, 15, or 20%. It's quite interesting. Cool. Just go for it.
Yeah, Peter, I want to ask. So basically, you say, the statistics don't really improve at the moment, right? Even that we are 20 years trying to work Agile. That's what you say, right?
No. Well, IT projects. I'm not saying Agile or not Agile. I'm saying that if in IT projects 2/3 fail in both in the early 1980s, as in currently. If you do Agile, you're more likely to be successful than if you don't do Agile by about 10 to 15%. I think roughly is the rough stats.
Yeah, I think the big problem is that we don't do really Agile. There are not a lot of people that do Agile. I'm sorry. The sequence of work where you go hand over from one to the other, you see it so many. And I think the number one characteristic of an Agilist is being open to learning. Most people are not. They are very dogmatic about their own position, and they don't want to learn. And that's part of what I said before about not really being open to change, and that's a thing. And Dominique was getting into the chat box and he said, "Hey, Ari, how come Dsdm only is UK based?" Well, it was not. There was a strong community in the Benelux, UK, of course, Benelux, but also Denmark, Sweden. I think in Australia and India, there were chapters set up, France. So it was not just UK, it was Northwestern Europe. But in combination with people not really liking change, what very often happens is that people try to find grip on the next thing that they see. And one of the downsides of Dsdm is if you read it, it's way too complex. And I agree with that. Sorry to say, I agree with that. too much detail, way too complex, not focusing on not making clear what it focuses on to a reader. And some other people find it, for example, and not only, but for example, in Scrum, it's compact, it's light, it's easy to read and understand. So that's it, because that's the next thing they can hold on. Getting into that continuous process of learning and improving is something that little people do.
Cool. Francisco has said, oh no, hang on, there's a comment around the development of Dsdm that Dominic sort of tagged. So going back, the Dsdm chapter being created around the world, but Dsdm doesn't seem to have had such big development then as other frameworks, except in the parts of the world like the UK. Why do you think that is?
That was what I think what I tried to say. Most people tend to stick to what it's got. Greg was just asking, was also one of the problems for Dsdm that it cost a lot of money to be able to read the latest version and to get into it. But I also know that was a big struggle in the Dsdm consortium at the time. And I also know that leading people in the Dsdm consortium rejected Scrum 100%. And I always think, what the fuck, man? This is great stuff. It's good experience. It's proven. Why are you resisting what other people do well? That's what we suffer from ourselves, right? You come in with your best lessons learned. And I think what Greg is saying, being forced to pay hindered the spread, and paying 20 euros for a little guide is okay, but paying 8,000 euros to get access, hey, that's too much money, right? That was 8,000 or 9,000 Dutch guilders, I think, at the time, for companies to be a member of the consortium. And then you need to, okay, what's my value?
Cool.
And one of the big problems is, I think, that we were talking about the methodologies for a long time. So you do Scrum or XP or Dsdm or whatever, but nobody was talking about, okay, how do we get from doing that from where we are today? How do we go through that change process, which is massive, right? The paradigm change is very complicated.
Cool. All right. So if I sort of, I'm just thinking of our next esteemed guest, Sam, who's already in waiting and with a very dark, background, getting ready to speak. So on a Thursday afternoon or Thursday, you got a call to say, hey, come speak at a conference talking about Agile. Come talk at a conference on lightweight software development sort of techniques. And that was a call from the Dsdm crew, which then bounced you across to the UK and then through there to the US for you to turn up to Snowbird. And what I'm hearing is that a lot of the big ticket items and trends that you were seeing were that there was a bit of a shift in the management thinking, and that's come out a little bit in some of the commentary and conversations. So shifting in management thinking from, you work for, jobs for life, perhaps, like a very traditional organization, to empowerment, individualism, your individual career, potentially maybe even contracting as well. We had the internet that sort of popped out. We had that then drove the speed of technology changing, which then drove the disruption of business models. So the need to respond to change became really, really critical. And they're sort of the big ticket things that sort of occurred off the back of all the big ERP programs way back in the late 90s to prepare for the millennial bug, right? So that's sort of the context we've got for that time frame. Cool, awesome. When you wrote it, or when you were there in 2001 wrote it, what did you hope to get from it after, what did you hope to come out of that conference with? Sorry, that was a poorly phrased question. I do apologize. When you went to the US on that long flight, you must have been thinking about something. What was the intent at the end of it that you wanted? What did you want to achieve?
Are you asking Sam now?
No, I'm asking you. Sorry, Ari. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to Sam. I was typing an answer to people.
Sorry, I just realized I missed one of my questions. That's why I wanted to ask it. So when you were on that plane to the US to go to the conference,
yeah,
what did you want at the end of that weekend? What did you think you were going to walk out with after the 2 days?
You have to imagine that this is a moment in time where the internet is just like this, right? So I'm flying there, and what I feel is I'm going to meet equally minded people that have been looking for a couple of years you know, for change. I found out, for example, that James Grenning started changing in 1998. Other people maybe did in the early 90s or the late 80s even, I don't know. So we all had a moment for change, and you meet like-minded people. That's really cool. The purpose was to make a publication about it. And I remember that Ward Cunningham said something like, oh, let's make a wiki out of it. I didn't even know what a wiki was, right? And at the time, and we started doing that, and we had no idea that this would happen. It was about making a statement. But I at least I cannot speak for everybody else, but I didn't foresee, you know, the impact. I didn't go there to make this kind of impact. It was to make a statement, right? And meet like-minded people to get learnings. I'm always trying to find learnings. And I think at the time, the most important one was getting learnings. Okay, you guys work differently too. How do you do this? What do you do? What is your best learning? What's your best practice, right? That kind of thing.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you towards the end. So I might push over to Sam. Sam, how you doing there?
Hello, Peter. I'm in the dark web.
You're in the dark web. Very good. So, so I do have some slides prepared about our dearly beloved friends from mobile phones. We could probably just talk through it. In 2016, right? Here's a random guess. Does anyone know what model iPhone was floating around? Hang on, let me look at the chat. iPhone 5, not quite, a bit younger than that. It was the iPhone 7, right? So iPhone 7 and iPhone 7 XL, right? The Google Pixel had just been released, and Huawei had just won best camera phone, right? The P9. So quite a different sort of technologies. It's hard to imagine it zoomed along that quickly in the last 12 or 13 or more years. Okay, so I guess in that sort of context, Sam, talk to us about the context you're in. What were you doing at the time around the 2015, 2016 mark that inspired you to write the Agnostic Agile?
Well, here's something funny. I was actually using Dsdm. I'm no shit. I was actually using a version of Dsdm. I was a program manager at a organization. And what we were doing is that we were reimagining a self-serve system. And actually, it was a global system. The company was Canadian, and one of our customers was Coles here in Australia. Big supermarket chains, and this self-serve system allowed these big supermarket chains to access, make use of, and strategize using big data, and completely stock their shelves and make predictions and so on, and make orders, all based on data analytics. So we were reimagining systems they already had, and we were building it from scratch. So I put together a team, a program team to build that project from inception all the way to, I think we got up to, safe lovers are going to love this on the call, a PI 20 or something. So, but when I joined this organization, I spoke to a lot of the teams and the people in there, and they kept telling me, oh, but we had a coach in, and he said we have to use Scrum, and we have to do 2-week sprints out of that, you know, not even Scrum, but 2-week sprints. And I kept hearing more and more and more about this. And at the time I was working with my fellow co-host on the podcast, Ali, and another chap called Mark. And actually Melanie Franklin was involved here and there as well, who's a co-founder of the Agnostic Agile site. So what I decided to do was have a chat. I had a little meetup with the Agile coaches at that time who I was working with. And I said, this is just complete bullshit. I'm actually sick and tired of reading, you know, almost vociferous posting on LinkedIn about, you know, Scrum is the way, or Kanban is the way, whatever it is, right? It was mostly from the Scrum camp, to be quite honest. But not even that, actually denigrating other ways of working. That's what really got to me. So long story short there, I decided to write a copy. When I get angry and emotional about things, I tend to write. It's healthier than, you know, throwing pillows around the room. Don't take that the wrong way. Anyway, I'll swiftly move on. So what I did was I put together some text in a shop in Soho, and that text became the initial copy of what we called then the Agnostic Agile Oath. And that was actually right at the end of 2016, going into 2017. I then came across Ari, and it was a funny thing, actually. Just like those guys invited Ari to the US, Ari invited me to Brussels, and this was in February 2017. And I spent a couple of days with Ari and a few other guys as well. And we talked about a lot of things. And one of those things was the Agnostic Agile Oath, as it was called at the time. You know, Ari really liked it. And as he just said on the call, he's always been an agnostic when it comes to Agile and agility. And so have I, to be honest with you. It's kind of in my DNA. So we put it together, we put the website up, and you know what happened when we launched it? We got a lot of venomous attacks on LinkedIn. Yeah, quite a lot. And that actually both upset me, but made me happy as well, because I knew we were touching a nerve and I knew we were on the right track. And to me, it's just common sense. And now, fast forward, what, 4 or 5 years later, whatever, it's pretty much accepted. I mean, you know, methods and ways of working and practices, yeah, the one size doesn't fit all. I think that's just common sense that is becoming more common. That's the long and short of it.
Fair enough. So you've spoken about the project that you're working on. Tell me more about some of the other things that, you know, you don't work in a vacuum, right? Because, you know, engaging with the community and talking to people around you. What were some of the other trends and things that you were seeing around the organization, or around the different organizations, around different clients, around, well, I think that would have been even pre-meetup. So around the Agile community where you would have caught up at the local pub with. Yeah,
well, SAFE was a really big thing back in 2016 or so, because they were then on, I believe, 4 or 4.5. And I was working with another client on quite a big SAFE project. Yeah, it was the UK Parliament. And they actually came in to visit me, and they saw how I implemented a version of, I would just say an agnostic version of SAFE, right? At the company I was talking about before. And the funny thing about that, now I said this on a podcast before, I might have said it on another meetup, we were about 8 months in, and someone ran up to me and said, "Are we doing SAFE?" Because I didn't mention the word at all. I didn't think it was important, right? We only did what was essential to us being effective. And the way it was implemented in that organization through Melanie Franklin, actually, caught the attention of a couple of other people outside that organization. And SAFE 4 was going around a lot in the community and the meetups at that time. And so I got talking to UK Parliament about this, and eventually started working with them. And but not out of the book, no, you know, right out of the framework stuff. It was really, there's lots of useful practices around here, right? So how do we make use of those practices, and how do we pull them in and make them work together to fit our context? And for me, that's what Agnostic Agile is, you know, but putting your customer front and center, and then looking around and pulling these practices out, and then creating a composition of practices that works for you and your customer. So there was a lot of that kind of talk at the time. In the Agnostic Agile meetup at that time, actually Ari again came down, and we had a big meetup with Melanie, Ari, if you remember, back in, it was also in February in Arcadia. Do you remember that? Arcadia in Oxford Circus?
I do, yeah, absolutely, I do. Melanie was there too?
Yeah, Melanie was there too. That was a really good one. But what I believe, where this is all going, Peter, I don't think the answer lies in, to make things better, I do not think the answer lies in ways of working or people or Agile per se alone. I believe, and I'm working on this, the answer must also lie in technology. You cannot separate ways of working from technology, or humans from technology for that matter. And I think for a long time now, we've been stuck in a certain paradigm. We don't even realize it. And I think that's going to change soon. And yeah, so I think
I jump in here, Sam. That technology part.
Yeah,
we get this right. And Agile is a mindset. We always talk about this. But you cannot go into 2-week deliveries if you don't have the technology supporting both your Agile way of working and your Agile delivery. You have to go there, right? And
Absolutely.
it's not easy.
And that's the thing with transformations, Ari, right? In like, you know it, large transformations. Okay, well, we're moving from a waterfall organization to an agile organization, you know, whatever that means. Oh, but you know, no, but we're not going to really look at the technology right now. We just want to change our ways of working. I mean, you might as well try to fit a circle into a square, or well, a square into a circle, or whatever. You can't change these things. Like, if you're changing one thing, you must also look at the other thing. And that's what I think most transformations today that I see and witness, they're just trying to squeeze agile into a waterfall box. And for me, a lot of the reason for that is because people sometimes don't want to change, but they're told they have to change. And so the response to that is, oh, they need to go on a mindset course or an agile course to make them think that, you know, to make them believe in this stuff. Well, I think it's all to do with belief systems. You know, humans and technology side by side. If they see things happening, if technology enables that agility, then I think we're going to have a much better chance of success.
So if what did project failures and things like that tie into your thinking around writing the Agnostic Agile?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, Agnostic Agile comes at it from a human perspective, right? It wasn't really, I didn't really incorporate much technology into that thinking at the time. But the human perspective, what really pissed me off is that people were transfixed on one way of working, right? And it was damaging, and it still is damaging to industry and to leaders who don't know any better and who say, oh, this is what Agile is. Everyone, blanket coverage, we're doing Scrum. And that's damaging to people who are already doing Kanban or who already have a way of working that actually works for them. You know, it takes them back, not forward. And I think that's the big thing I rebelled against, you know, with Agnostic Agile. I didn't like seeing that. And I was literally working with people who had been affected by that mentality, right? Who actually verbatim said to me, Sam, thank you so much. Sam and team, thank you so much. We didn't realize it was like this before. We were told this, right? And, you know, I like stories like that because I don't like people being locked into one way of thinking.
So between our friends of you know, certification bodies of Scrum and SAFe, you got an adequate beating after publishing that you need to be able to choose your way of working to a point. Fair enough. Cool. So when you wrote the Agile, Agnostic Agile, what was your hope?
Well, what I didn't intend is for it to get to where it is now. I did not intend, and I was working with Ari, of course, and Melanie with this. I did not intend to, you know, go out there and start a massive movement or anything like that. I mean, Agnostic Agile is a community, but it's not a community that you know, you'll find lots of Slack groups on. You know, we tried those things and they didn't really work for us at that time. But my intention was to just get the thinking out there and to get the realization out there that Agile by definition is actually agnostic. By definition. Look at the Agile Manifesto. Look at the part of the Agile Manifesto that most people don't even look at. The part where it actually does mention Dsdm and other things, right? The back page kind of thing of the manifesto. And most people just ignore that completely. I was at a meetup in London, right, where they were talking about the manifesto and they were talking about how amazing LESS is, large-scale Scrum, and it is great. But the comments I heard from the audience were this: Dsdm, ha ha ha, who the hell uses that? That's not Agile. Little did they know it's actually written on the damn manifesto itself. So this dogmatism in Agile was the real problem that I had, because actually it was putting people off Agile. And so that activated me.
So project failures, you know, dogmatic methodologies are not aligned to delivery, the inability of methodologies to learn and respond to change, those types of things. What about the people that you're working with? Has the culture changed, or the skill or the capabilities changed enough such that this approach made sense at the time of 2015, 2016?
Yeah, I think this was almost a happy coming together of certain things, right? I worked with, so I set up this program and I designed the way of working, and I based it on a version of Agile at Scale, which was SAFe, right? but I just looked at essential safe, and I thought, okay, that's a nice way. That will kind of fit where I am right now. However, I didn't do safe. We didn't do it. Rather, we took certain practices from it and we enhanced it, if you like, and adapted it to the way we needed to do it, which is why I didn't call it safe, which is why 8 months later, someone said, is this safe? It kind of, we do PIs and stuff. Yeah, we do, but pretty much everything else is different. So the people I was working with at the time were of that mindset because we were working together on this. And so we were in the zone together. We were in tune with each other on taking these practices, these established practices, not just from SAFE, of course, creating some of our own and just putting them together in a way that really did work for us, right? It was a successful implementation of whatever we want to call it, right? And we got product to market. And once we got product to market, we went from release to release to release. And it was great. And our sprint reviews were glowing, right? We had the stakeholders in, we were showing stuff, working software. And everyone I was working with at the time was in this kind of mental state, you know, of, we didn't call it agnostic agile at the time, but it was basically agile, which by nature is agnostic. And so they really helped me put all of this stuff together, put my thinking together, and just, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have written Agnostic Agile, because they really supported me as well. As it, obviously, Ari, who was a huge influence in Agnostic Agile, right? Not least because I was doing Dsdm at the time.
People became more independent thinkers and more about outcomes and things like that. And when you talk about releases and things like that, it's almost like you're talking about, it's the speed of technology allows you to release more quickly. The customers are moving more quickly. So it's about responding to change more quickly, right?
It was also about talking to your stakeholders within your organizations and with your clients on a level that they can actually appreciate, and you're not throwing things at them. You know, you're not saying we've got to do it this way. You're actually having a dialogue with them and say, well, we're doing this and this and this like this because of this. Is there anything else we should know? You know, and we're co-creating rather than lifting and shifting and dropping of one size fits all on them, and then massive transformation to make ourselves fit into this box.
Cool. All right, thank you very much. Any comments or questions for Sam right now before we flip on to the next thing? Oh,
Hi.
That's a great question.
Okay.
I'll let our panelists have a look at it.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Go for it.
Okay, thanks. Hi everyone. I'm wondering why, as you mentioned, the reviews, right? So I'm wondering why people or teams usually think that they cannot share also the bad news and that they were not able to achieve a goal in the sprint with stakeholders. That everything has to be like a show for everyone there, that everything is going well, and we only make a review because we deliver things. But I think that it's wrong from my side, because it's very important that we share the actual situation of what we're doing with them to quickly act on and take decisions on it, right? So I don't know if that happens, but I see it a lot, that reviews turn into that no, we cannot share bad news, or just try to put something there.
Oh yeah, no, not at all, Francesca. In fact, the very first thing we did in our sprint reviews at that time was go through some of our burn down charts and explain why we couldn't hit certain things and what they're not going to see. But we explained why that was the case and what we're doing to remedy it. In fact, we started with, if you like, the quote unquote bad news. Even if we had nothing to show, we'd still have the sprint review and explain why we had nothing to show. And it could be because half the team went off sick, or it could be that something else happened, or there was another priority in the business, or whatever, or some developer kicked up a fuss and they couldn't decide between the DevOps tools, and so the whole thing collapsed. Absolutely, man, absolutely, no, 100%.
Yeah, probably you think that probably this is one of the misleading or misunderstandings from the Scrum framework, that it says there, and it's, and if you read the guide, it says that you have to share, everything that is done. It never says that share the bad news too.
Yeah, and I think there's the difference between what the Scrum guide says and what Scrum practitioners practice as well. for me, honestly, it's just common sense. Now I rarely look at the guys, and I admit I've rarely looked at the latest Scrum. You know, I've read the posts about it, but it's not going to change much. So
Can I say something, guys, about this? You know, for me, Agile is about avoiding delay. And we get delays because we misunderstand. We deliver the wrong stuff because we handle the information in the wrong way. And one of the things we try to do in Agile, solve that. So I always say transparency is the carrier of Agile. And it's about what you deliver. So you have every couple of days, not every 2 weeks, every 2-3 days, you have a short session with all stakeholders to make sure on the content side you're aligned. But also that daily, including the visual management, shows every single day where we are. And if something is wrong, we try to fix it, right? That's where we have the daily for. And sharing that kind of information, not waiting until a retrospective, but every single moment that you can, is essential. Most people don't like sharing because that transparency puts them on display. And in some companies, it's not nice to be on display, I can tell you, right? So it's not without a risk. So this is why you have this big paradigm change that you need to do to really make it, you know, an Agile organization where you're allowed to fail. But if people don't have those visuals on the wall and squeeze everything into, you know, whatever tool they use, right? Like Jira or Trello or whatever, that's not sharing the information. Should be there on the wall all the time. How you do it, that's up to you, but it should be there. Transparency is the carrier of everything.
Ari, you reminded me of something I did at that time as well in that same organization. We had this is hilarious. So we had what we called an innovation room, right? So in that room, we could innovate. Anyway, this was the innovation room. And what we used to do, well, there was lots of meeting and town halls in there and like, you know, kind of hackathons and stuff in there. But what I did, because the innovation room was in the hallway and everyone always passed it, I put up a huge, like 2 or 3 A3 posters, and I made a scale on that poster. And it was a spectrum. And the leftmost side was not very agile, and the rightmost side was very agile. And the question was, how agile do you think we are today, or something like that, or in this period of time? And there were little sticky dots, and they were available, you know, just next to the poster. So the idea was people would pick a sticky dot up and place a dot somewhere on that spectrum. And what we would do, we would use the innovation room at the end of that period or time box to talk about it. Right? And say, well, why are the sticky dots all clustered here? And what can we do to make them, to shift them to the right more? What needs to happen? And that was that's all transparency, right? Let's just talk about things, just like Ari was saying. Agile's a spectrum, not a switch.
Yeah, I think the visual management is highly underestimated in terms of avoiding mistakes and cutting out redundant processes. You know, if you have your information available, you don't have to ask someone about that information. It's there, right? If you update it, if it's owned by the team and the team feels out of the Agile rituals that you have every day, that you update those visuals, that everybody that passes by, whether it's an innovation room or something else, they know where you are.
Yeah,
they know where you are. That's good. That's what it's supposed to be.
All right, cool. Any additional questions of Sam before we move on to the next topic? Oh, you've been compelling, Sam. Alrighty, so I'm just going to share.
Kokoro. I don't know what that means.
I think it's the next step beyond Shuhari. I think they talk about.
Okay.
Hey, Pete.
Something.
Yes.
There was a question from Dominique in Paris, which you didn't pick up, which I thought, if you've got time, would be interesting.
Yeah, cool. You want to, Dominic, you want to call it out so we can talk about it?
Which one did we miss?
I'll call it out if Dominique's not there. It's at 9 p.m.
My micro wasn't working.
Yeah, here he is.
It was just a question about a reflection more. That, of course, Agile Manifesto was agnostic, and there's a lot of talk about agnostic versus commercial, but I think without an ecosystem and without what has been put around with the first certification around Scrum and so forth, and without the system, maybe Agile won't be as spread today as it will be without it.
We will never know, right?
Yeah. But we know that some framework, Agile framework, which didn't have an ecosystem important ecosystem just didn't disappear almost, like Crystal,
I think
and so forth.
all the methodologies have their own ecosystem because the people who are responsible for the methodologies, they create the ecosystem around it, whether it's by certification or other stuff. I remember with the Dsdm consortium, we had the road shows, right, where we would travel around the countries and talk about innovations and knowledge sharing and stuff. So the question is, was the ecosystem there before things like books and certification or afterwards? I think at least in my situation, there were ecosystems actively involved before any kind of certification already. But of course, you know, Dominic, it's so clear that the whole certification thing around, for example, Scrum and also SAFe has created a lot in terms of spreading the word. Let me put it like this. Absolutely. And even the ecosystem around Agnostic Agile. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Could we have reached for the same things where we are today, the achievements, if those ecosystems would? I think people create ecosystems by nature, right? You feel connected, you start sharing knowledge, eat pizza, that kind of thing. Especially the pizza connects people, I think.
Cool.
Can I have a bit of your pizza? Oh, mine is awesome, or mine is awful. Okay, that kind of thing. And that's the same thing with lessons learned when you go to, whatever you are doing and trying to, at least if your intention is to help. That's for me what an ecosystem is about, right? That you say, okay, I have something here that I might help you, but by the way, I need something too here, right? From the ecosystem. And if that process keeps on going, ecosystems will be big drivers of these kind of developments, agile or not, I think.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So what I might do is flip to a bit of an exercise. Let me fire up my screen. So has it all magically appeared? Yep. Cool. Has everyone used Miro? I'll just give a quick little exercise. How will Agile evolve in the next 2, 5, and 8 years? Awesome Dave is already there. If you haven't used it, you can click on this, click and drag, double click hello world, and just type. There you go. Easy as that. You can click and drag it anywhere you want. If you have a mouse, the scrolly button does really wonders to zoom in and out. Okay. What I'd like you to do, I'm going to give us, say, 5 or 7 minutes to do, 5 minutes to do this. Answer the question, how will Agile evolve over the next 2, 5, 8 years into the future? And we'll have a conversation about this. Okay. Any questions or comments?
The link, Peter.
It's in the chat. I've just sent it. Cool.
Thanks.
I give you 5 minutes. We'll pop ourselves a minute, refresh our teas and coffees and all that, and go from there.
I love this. In 2 years, we'll have the end of safe. In 5 years, we'll have safe version 10.
Someone said not to predict the future. That's fair enough. Mars is colonized by agile people only. Okay. Resafe V1, the little known alternative reality option. Ah, everything remote. Thank you, whoever did that. Ascendancy of robots and AI. Cool. So while you keep putting this in, I think one of the questions I saw earlier, which I quite like, and I'll ask our panelists to jump in on this. All right, if I can work out where it is Agile still relevant in the future? Sam or Ari? Ari, you're on mute.
Will people like ice cream in the future? Well, what do you think, Ari?
I will.
You're on mute, Ari. I know you will, Ignacio, whoever said that. Ari, you're on mute. Okay, I think he said he knows.
So I'll ask you, Sam, then, as well, panelist.
Well, I mean, that's a complex question, right? It depends. It might be that, and it depends what future you're talking, like how long into the future do we mean here? In 50 years, maybe our organizations will be rebuilt or split off and rebuilt again in a way that, you know, we've actually conquered the whole silo problem, and maybe we are small and adaptive teams. The problem with this question, it's a great question, but I think the problem with this kind of thinking and the response I can give is that, and looking at everything on that board, on that Miro board, is that we're focusing about Agile in terms of ways of working. And here's the irony. Here's what I think is going to happen, right? I think we're going to go back to technology, back to software, and we're going to have to find a better way of creating software, just like the manifesto says. Because if we find a better way of making software, then our ways of working will change, will evolve. You can't just have ways of working, right? And you cannot have agile organizations without technology catching up. It's both. Right? I mean, look, that's probably where my mindset is at right now. How do we make technology better? How do we make writing software better, more accessible? And how will that change ways of working when that happens? Right? If you think about programming, we've gone from machine learning to assembly, to lower level languages, right? Procedural to object-oriented languages. Where are we going next? If technology hasn't stopped evolving, so I think the evolution of writing software and technology will co-evolve with ways of working. That's my view. It's not really an answer, but I think we need to bring that into perspective as well.
Well, maybe I can add a little bit on it, Sam, because I think Agile, without the word, right, but the practices that we know will become the default. I mean, you have to. You have to be able to respond to this ever faster changing world. You have to be quick, with delivery of what is valuable for your organization. So that's one. Second, we know this cannot be done without the proper technology, and it cannot be done without the proper people. So you will see that there will be, on one side, Agile will become, okay, this is what it is, what the waterfall has become, will over the next, I don't know, decade or so, replaced by Agile thinking. But it will also be, you have to support that Agile way of working by the technology, otherwise you can't keep up. And in the world where we are today, where people are more and more aware of what companies can do for them, instead of being forced into standard situations in standard organizations have to open up and tailor-made offer for their people a beautiful future. So you see the human side in the word of HR, if you like. And also you see the tech side, and that they will together, you need them to have this agility as an organization, and that's where we'll go. It will become the default, supported by the human side, embedded in HR, and by the technology side, because you cannot do without technology, period.
Fair enough. There's questions around, talk about technology. There's questions or comments from Michael talking about, will low code, no code have an impact on the ways of working and developing software, right? There's commentary around, Mars getting involved and Cylons. Mindset changes, Rowan's spoken about. Mindset changes and training being made mandatory, remotes good, self-coding out CG, Flutter and open system. Is that the future? Any other comments or thoughts?
Well, some very good observations there. To look at Michael's comment, is low code, no code going to have an impact on ways to develop? Well, yeah, but not in their current form. Right now, they're domain specific. They're very limiting. They focus on like UI or something, or a very particular aspect of development. It's just not there yet. But eventually, well, maybe. Yeah, it's a good shout.
I think that I think if just to jump in, I think if you talk about some of the early comments that Ari made around why from the late 90s, early 2000s Agile, we spoke about the shift in management thinking. So we spoke about empowerment, individualism, and things like that. We spoke about the internet. We spoke about the speed of technology changing, hence disrupting business models, and therefore the requirement to respond to change become more important. And I think that those trends really seem to hold true both in 2015, right? And they certainly hold far more true now, today. I think if anyone's had the pleasure of working with some grads and recent grads from university or from school, the whole concept of prototyping, experimentation, and putting stuff out on Instagram and all that is just quite normal to them. So technology is seamless, and they're not, whilst a lot of our time is spent trying to make the technology work, they just simply experiment at speed. They have a business idea, they test it on Instagram or Facebook, or they use Facebook apparently, or Twitter. They get the right responses and then they go to the next step. So the whole concept of prototyping, experimenting, fast response and change becomes incredibly native to lots of them, lots of people. Cool. All right, I'm conscious of time. Are there any broad comments or questions anyone would like to make based on what they see on the board? Or any other more open questions to our lovely panelists?
Can I ask? Can I answer the question that Michael is putting on? Can the benefits of Agile apply to non-technical businesses? Is it already an integral part of these businesses? For me, it's a misperception that Agile is only for technology. As I said, I always use it outside the world of IT as well, where you bring in the Agile way of working a full delivery together. If you do a marketing campaign, if you organize a conference like this, for me, that is all to be organized in an Agile way, starting with the value that you want to achieve, and then breaking it down to a backlog. So for me, Agile is something that you do all together, not just IT. It has to be the full delivery.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Sam, any other comments?
Well, I guess my question's right back at some of these questions, because people are talking about AI. I'm not sure if these are serious comments, because I can see jokes as well. And yeah, I agree, the multiverse will solve the question. But what in AI how will AI deal with change and Agile in new generations? And AI systems will write software, Anthony wrote. I think they will. I think they already do, actually, don't they, in some places? But I can't quite make the connection on how AI will add to the world of agility, if you like, unless you mean AI will completely write our digital solutions, which is maybe a long way off.
I think that the AI thing is so human to AI collaboration will need to be an essential part of agility. So, and those who aren't up with it will get left behind. And I'd like to say that's going to be different, but I don't think it is.
Sam, from my humble perspective, I look at the phrase AI, and I see and hear what's going on. And in my own mind, it seems inevitable that the artificiality and the robotic element tend to subscribe to the need to increase and be more efficient and faster and speed, which may be rightly or wrongly conflated with this notion of agility and making things more spontaneous and easier and faster. Whether it's right or wrong, I think AI may smear a lot of what we're thinking here inadvertently. I think robotics, by virtue of the fact that it seems to have an overlay and a flavor that is evil in one respect, because it will do away with processes and manual intervention and jobs, and make things sleeker, faster, better, I think is something we need to be respectful and mindful of in our thinking. It's just my humble opinion.
How can anybody disagree with your humble opinion, Ignacio? We love it.
Cool. All right. So again, I'm just conscious of time. I'd just like to do a massive thank you to our two panelists that are here tonight, so Ari and Sam. So thank you very much. You got to unmute so they can hear you.
Thank you. I can only say
Thank you.
Thank you. You're totally awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll
Muchas
stop
gracias.
the recording.
Hi, everyone.